Okay.
Oh, does it say live? I think it's now got a stop broadcast, so I think we might be live. Live. It's saying we're live. Right, good afternoon. We've had a little problem with getting on connectivity, internet. I think that was our problem. So sorry that you had me saying, are we live? We're live, are we? And that's because I can see a little red button. So anyway, good afternoon and welcome to Interfaith Explorers with me, Claire Clinton, this afternoon. And I have a special guest with me, which is Paul. Good afternoon, Paul.
Good afternoon. Hello, Claire.
And we've met before at a few different things. And yes. Paul's been very helpful for me because I run an interfaith group with secondary schools in Newham, and you've been a couple of times
yes.
and spoken to them about being a humanist.
It's been a great pleasure to do that. Yes.
So when we decided that this afternoon we were going to have a look at secular worldviews and why being able to talk as a teacher about people who don't believe in God but do have views about how we should treat one another and how we should work in the world and with one another, that I thought, well, Paul was somebody obviously that I could maybe invite up to my office. Today we're looking out on a beautiful day. I hope it's sunny where you are. It's very nice here in Newham this afternoon. So welcome to our webinar for this month. It's June already, how the time flies. And we're looking at secular worldviews or non-religious responses to some big philosophical questions in life. And so I invited Paul here to help me and just to give a bit of authenticity to the things we're saying. And in the same way as with all religions, just one person can't represent everybody within that group. So when we've had Muslims here before, obviously they're representing their view and their interpretation of things. And so Paul's going to talk freely with us in that way this afternoon. So just thinking a little bit more about practically what's in front of you. So you might be able to see Paul and I on your screen at the moment. And obviously that's a great delight for them, isn't it, Paul, to be able to see us. We're looking at ourselves, so it's very off-putting yes. for us, which is why we'll keep looking at each other rather than the screen. But just below there is a place where you can type in any questions that you might want to ask Paul and I this afternoon. And if we can think of an answer, we will give it to you. And if not, we'll go away and think about it and respond back to you at another point. Also, to the side, you'll be able to see the PowerPoint that Paul and I prepared before today, which is just going to give you the main points that we're talking about. And so I know that some teachers like to have that up in front and just listen to us, Paul. And so you can choose how you want to do it. I know some teachers will have printed out the PowerPoint. Paul and I have got one of those in front of us here. We'll wave it at you. And you may be wanting to write notes or saying questions. If there's anything that we say that's not clear or you'd like clarification, then just email in, and the beautiful assistant who is to my right then writes these things down to us and passes them on to us. So that's really helpful. As you know, Interfaith Explorers is supported by UNESCO, and it is a whole load of resources for teachers to be able to use at Key Stage 2 and then up into Key Stage 3 to help facilitate discussions around philosophical beliefs in the classroom, and to do that with increasing amounts of confidence. And so these webinars are here to sort of help you in your professional development and get you to think about things and hopefully help you in that way to be a bit more confident about what you're doing. So my name, as you already know, is Claire Clinton, and I'm the RE advisor here in Newham. And Paul also works here in Newham.
Indeed, yes.
You do? That's right. And Paul, I'm not sure if you live here, or I thought you might live in Wanstead, but I might be wrong, you see.
I live in an adjacent borough.
You live in an adjacent borough, that's fine.
I've worked in Newham for 32 years.
Yes, so a long time. And you're the chair of the East London Humanists Group or Association, yeah?
Yes.
And affiliated into British Humanist Association?
It's a partner group of
Yes.
the British Humanist Association.
Okay. Lovely, thank you. So, Paul, what do you do in your day-to-day job?
I'm actually a solicitor.
Yeah.
So nothing to do with teaching or anything of that sort.
Okay. And we really appreciate you being with us here today. So we've got some objectives for our webinar today, and I'm just going to call them up on the screen here. But we're going to think about how secular worldviews can really help improve interfaith activities, understand the benefits of being able to call on these sorts of views as we're talking with pupils, and provide teachers with ideas that you can use in the classroom. So our first slide in our presentation today looks at sort of secular worldviews really in the UK, and our last census was 2011, and in that census 25% of the population of England and Wales ticked the box to say no religion. Were you one of them, Paul?
I was. I have to say that the census is probably not completely accurate,
No.
because a lot of people would have said that they had a religion,
Yes.
simply because it was their parents' religion.
Absolutely.
So the chances are that it's actually more than 25% of people who don't actually practice any religion.
Yes, absolutely. And we've talked before about some of these census figures, and when you get say here in Newham, there's the figure of sort of 40% of people are Christians, but we know in terms of church attendance that sits at about 14% in the borough. So there's a difference, isn't there, as you're saying, between where people feel maybe they belong, and that can do with culture and it can do with your parents, and actually the difference of practicing.
Yes.
So yes, we absolutely recognise that. But the reason I suppose I put that in was just to flag up the fact that there were all those people who did feel confident enough, even if they had been brought up in a particular tradition, to tick that box and say, actually, no, I'm not religious.
Yes. And it is a significant change over the years. It is something which has
grown.
Definitely.
Yeah, absolutely. So when we're talking about why should we talk about secular worldviews or humanism? Obviously, there's a number of different secular views, and humanism is one within there. So why should we do that? Well, because we want to be inclusive. And it's really important that religious education and PSHE, personal social education, is reflecting society. And actually, if we don't do that, and a quarter of people tick that box, then we're really not representing society within the classroom. And then for pupils, it begins to feel a bit out of touch what we're teaching. It's not seemingly quite so relevant because actually it's not their experience. And so that's something to be mindful of, and it's one of the reasons why I think back in, it was probably 2005 onwards, that religious RE, religious education syllabuses, started asking to make sure that you were looking at secular worldviews and that humanism was in there. And so it wasn't just the 6 primary religions that was being spoken of, but the other views were given a place as well.
Yes.
Yeah. So I think that's been a positive step forward. It's not saying that we're all the way there, but that's why your school should be making sure that your staff feel confident around who these people are and what they believe, but also that children have that ability to be able to see that is one valid answer to some of these questions, and actually they have to make a choice and they have to think it through for themselves. And it's not that RE is trying to take them away from their family backgrounds, but RE is trying to challenge and making people think about what they believe and why they believe it. And that's important.
Yes. Well, I think it's important that all the possible prejudices of children against people from a different belief system are challenged and questioned, because we all have to live with each other, and there has been a lot of intolerance towards people without any religion, and there still is, they just say, throughout the world. So I think it's important that children understand that people such as myself and many of the people I know who aren't religious, are actually perfectly decent people who deserve to be treated with as much respect as we treat them.
And actually, when I can remember the first time you came to my student group, and these were students in year 9 and year 10 at secondary, and particularly for some of my students, they hadn't really come across people who didn't believe in God.
Yes.
So they were used to this idea that you might believe in a different God, or you might have a different way of practicing your religion. And I remember the question they kept sort of asking, going back round, was, but how do you know what to do? Because for them, it was like their holy book told them how to behave, or God had said how to do things. And it took them a little while really to begin to understand that there was another way of working things out.
It was very striking just how alien my approach to life seemed to be to so many of the youngsters there. I'm so used to mixing with people with similar views to myself, that it doesn't strike me that there's anything odd about me, but clearly they thought I was rather odd. So it was a very useful encounter just to break down those barriers. Yeah,
no, it was fantastic. And I suppose depending on where you are in the country will depend. Newham's a bit unusual because we always say here in Newham, it's really important that we are doing non-religious views to philosophy and questions in life, because most of our pupils here do believe in God. And so therefore it is a bit unusual for them. They're not mixing. But where I grew up on the Isle of Wight, that was a very normal thing. So I suppose it depends on where you live and who you're mixing with, and who your family mixes with, as to how normal these things are. So on the next couple of slides, we've sort of had a go at defining, well, in fact, I took a dictionary definition to define secular world views. Paul, could you just read that out for us? Is that possible? Thank you.
I will. Any system of thought or action concerned with the interests or ideals of people, the intellectual and cultural movement characterised by an emphasis on human interests rather than religion.
Yeah, so there's your big definition, and as I said, there are many different groups then that would fit within that. And what we're going to talk a little bit about today is humanism, and the sort of philosophy really that Paul has. Have you always believed in it, or is it something that has grown in your life throughout time? There's a big question.
Well, I think one of the first points to make is that humanism isn't some sort of rigid doctrine, and to coin a phrase, it's a very broad church, if you don't mind me using that expression. But it's a view which I think a huge number of people share of the world and the way they live their lives. But very often people simply don't recognise it. And there are all sorts of historical reasons for that. We're not taught about humanism, or we weren't when I was growing up. So people just don't know what you mean very often when you say, I'm a humanist. So it wasn't actually until relatively late in my life that I realised, after reading about it, that actually this defines my approach to life. And I, for various reasons, then decided to become more involved as a humanist. But I would say that really the way I led my life for the whole of my life was based on humanist values and principles, which I learned from my parents, who again never defined themselves as humanists, but that was just how they lived their lives.
How they lived their lives. And I think that's very true for people. And so as a teacher, when you're teaching in your class, you might find that pupils wouldn't necessarily define themselves as humanists, but as you teach about humanism and as you explain, they will identify with it. And a bit like Paul's saying, that through reading and through education, I suppose, then you began to be able to see that there were other people that shared a very similar approach. And we put labels on things always. We, as human beings, we like doing that, don't we? And as you say, it's a very broad church. with lots of different people within it. But there are some things that humanists would sort of agree on. One of them is the fact that that you would be atheist.
Yes.
Yes.
Another complication is that the word humanist has had different meanings over the ages.
Yeah.
But certainly in the context of, say, the British Humanist Association, we are either atheists or agnostics.
Yes.
Basically, we don't believe in God.
Yes. So people who don't believe in God. An agnostic being somebody who, having looked at the evidence, it's not somebody who just shrugs and says, I don't know, but having seriously looked at the evidence, would say, I can't prove it or disprove it. And so that agnostic position isn't a sort of, I don't really care. Mm. It's a really thought out position. And again, teachers sometimes don't know that, that there are many thoughtful agnostics. Again, it's not just well, I'm not anything. It's been thought through. And so the reason I've been talking about secular worldviews is secularism is a way of seeing a society or a system run without reference to God, a deity, a creator. And so there's a lot of things in British society that are secular. They run without reference to religion or God. And then we have other things because of our history and our culture where you can see there are references to it. So for instance, the Queen. And being the head of the Church of England. So it's going back in time into our history as to why she has that position. But then we have laws and we have judiciary and things like that don't go away and pray to God to find out whether someone is guilty or not. We have a jury and we have people who put forward cases and fair trials and things like that. And that is a sort of secular system. It's a way of working without reference to God.
Can I say there is so much confusion around the terms secular and atheist, and people muddle the two up very often. It's so easily done because it's used very loosely. You can believe in a secular society even if you're religious.
Absolutely.
And there are many people, including myself, who would say that it's actually the best protection for all religions and beliefs to live in a secular society, because everyone is then treated equally and with equal respect.
There's a place for everyone. Yes. And absolutely. And I think sometimes the newspapers, when they talk about secularism, is talking about getting rid of religion, and that's, I think you're right in pointing that out, that the word can be used in different ways, and it's really important to define those things, and especially with young people, because remember, they're picking up all sorts of information all the time, and sometimes misinformation about whatever subjects that we're doing with them. So secular humanism is then a way of looking at how the world works. So a lot of secular humanism sort of has science as a very important platform of being able to understand how the world works, is through whether you call them the laws of nature or, how worlds function, and is going on then in terms of ethics, looking at sort of the consequences, and that's how it gets to, that's why you should treat other people the way you would like to be treated, because it has look at the consequences, that if you don't do that, would you like that treated to that happening to you, and if you wouldn't, then you shouldn't do it to others, and an idea of sort of value of every, I suppose, person. Does that make sense to you as I'm saying it to you? Come on, improve what I'm saying, Paul.
Yes, I place great value on science. The idea, which is certainly central, I think, to humanism, is to look at the evidence.
Yes.
And it doesn't, maybe the two words are interchangeable, science and evidence. Science is based on evaluating evidence, but it's something we all do in our everyday lives. We look at the evidence of how what we do affects other people and so on, and we weigh it up and we make decisions. And that's the rational way of living our lives.
Actually, rational is really good, because that begins to then, I think, a word when I read about humanism, or if I'm on the British Humanist Association website or something, then rational comes up quite a lot. So it's logical, and as you say, trying to look at evidence and evaluate things. And I don't think that anybody, actually, whether you were a theist who is a scientist, or if you were a humanist and as a scientist, you're understanding that science is ever changing because of that evidence that comes in. And science is about theories that you try and prove and disprove, and we evolve, and theories evolve through that. So rationalism actually is very important, and that's a good word, isn't it, to pick up, because that's what it's about. So let's go. So for you as a humanist, what would you say are your sort of central beliefs that help you decide how to live?
One belief is that we only have one life.
Yeah.
And that's very fundamental. I don't believe in an afterlife.
Yeah.
And that affects me in all sorts of ways. One is that I think it's very important to make the most of this life. I don't mean by having wild parties all the time or that sort of thing, but to lead a fulfilling life, which is fulfilling to me, but also fulfilling to other people, to my family, friends, to the world at large, and so on. And it's doing those things that gives meaning to my life. It also, I think, gives a particular value to life. So, just from a very personal point of view, I find the idea of war, violence, and so on absolutely abhorrent, because it would be comforting to think that maybe if someone has a dreadful life now, they will at least have a pleasurable afterlife. But I'm afraid I can't believe in that. And so I think it's the most awful thing to hurt someone or to take someone else's life. So it affects me in that very profound way. Because
it's wasting life, isn't it? I suppose.
It's such a precious thing, and that's, I think, something which is deeply ingrained as a humanist in the belief that we must make the most of our lives and of everyone else's life, because it's the only one we have.
Thank you. And the point you made earlier, right at the start, was that you can live a good life without having to reference to religious beliefs.
Yes.
That this golden principle, or treating people the way you'd like to be treated, seeing the value in human beings. That's also really core, I would say, as well.
It is. Yes. And it's one of the questions which, of course, comes up all the time with youngsters. They're puzzled about how we can do that. And I mean, an interesting example which comes up is dietary beliefs. And of course, for many religions, they will get their beliefs from looking at their scriptures and so on. For a humanist, we don't have any source of information, but we again weigh up the evidence and consider what's right and what's wrong. So, for example, we might think it's unkind to kill animals and eat animals, although by no means all humanists are vegetarians, for example, but certainly they might feel it's cruel to kill animals in a certain way. And certainly we wouldn't eat, say, endangered species or anything like that, because we believe in looking after the planet. So we have our own way of looking at the evidence and weighing it up, deciding, well, is this the right thing to do or not, rather than looking for a source somewhere else.
Which tells you then what to do. That's really, thank you, that's really fascinating and really helpful, I think, for teachers. There's a book that's been published very recently, and I did have it. Oh, here it is. Sorry, everyone, I'm out of shot for a moment. I know this is back to front for you, but it says, what is humanism and how do you live without a God, and other big questions for kids. And it's written by Michael Rosen and Anne-Marie Young. And I've been showing it to teachers here in Newham, both primary and secondary. And there's lots of really helpful stuff in here for teachers. And so what we'll do is we'll put the ISBN and maybe some information about this. I'll add it into the PowerPoint because you might find that useful as something to have a read of and to have in your school library. I would definitely recommend that. But within there is something that Michael and Anne-Marie have written called the 10 Commitments. And it talks about sort of 10 ways of behaving that would feel right for them as a humanist. And so the first one is altruism. Secondly, caring for the world around us. Critical thinking, which is a lovely link to last month, because I was saying to Paul last month, Lisa Naylor was here, who does a lot of work with philosophy, and we were talking about critical thinking. Empathy, and I find that interesting because that's right at number 4, a bit like altruism, right at the top. You know, not just thinking of yourself, but thinking of others. And empathy, that ability to put yourself in someone else's shoes and think about how it would be for them if this was happening. So ethical development and that rational weighing up of the best way forward. And Paul's just given us a lovely example with eating meat and whether that's right to do, and what animals then, if you are eating meat, and how should they be looked after. My parents don't believe in God, and so I was brought up in a home where there wasn't a place of worship or prayers or things like that, and believe very passionately in that philosophy of we work things out and do things by some humanist principles. And when I was 13, they went to the Isle of Wight and both gave up their jobs, and we did like the good life. And so they decided that if we were going to eat meat, then we needed to bring it up, and it needed to be cared for nicely, and it wasn't going to go to an abattoir. And it was, so if we were going to eat meat, we were going to do it in a certain way. And I think it's not just people who don't believe in God who think that. That's still stayed with me. So when I did go on to decide that I did believe in God, that really is, I can't eat meat unless it's produced in a certain way. So my parents sort of ingrained that into me, but that ethical development is important. The next one they have on the list that you can see on the PowerPoint is global awareness. So, for instance, what we're doing here and how that affects other places, as well as those big issues at the moment about climate change and trading issues. There's all sorts of things within global awareness of how we treat others as well as how we treat the planet. Human rights, peace and social justice. You've talked about the importance of peace and not war as an option. Responsibility. We have just this one life and we need to take responsibility. And service and participation. And I thought those 10 commitments were lovely, and I've never seen them presented in that way. But I think really useful for school teachers because of the 10 commandments. There'll be a very natural, I can see lessons where you put those two together and look at, you know, which and why and where would you put them and in what order. And where children can really unpack some of those ideas and think about their importance. So yes, so we hope that that would be of use to you. And do all of those things resonate with you, Paul?
Oh yes, as I say, it's not a rigid doctrine, so it's not something that we would kind of drum into people who join our group or anything of that sort. But it's a useful guide to the kind of approach that we would take to living our lives, because all the time we have this problem of people saying, what is a humanist? What do you believe in? Because we don't have a holy book which we can refer people to. There's no one kind of tome which they can read and look up in the index and say, oh, that's the definitive version. So anything like this is actually really helpful, just to give a sense of our belief systems and how we approach life.
Thank you. So I hope that as we've talked, you're feeling a little bit more confident about who a humanist is, their approach, their values. And so now we just want to move on to why then using this in the classroom. We've talked about it being important because it's inclusive. It's also important because it's encouraging empathy, and that's a key skill, and it's one of our key skills in religious education, that we're wanting children to become more empathetic, so that they're not just considering their own way and what they believe and how they feel, but yes, they can understand that and they can investigate that and learn more about that, but also that they're caring about others and thinking about others. And I do think humanist approach, like we were saying with the 10 commitments, and comparing that to the 10 commandments or golden rules in Sikhism, just gives a really good challenge to pupils, because it makes them consider, oh, hang on a minute, why? Oh, they're not agreeing. Why are they not agreeing? What are they agreeing on? And there are many shared values between different philosophies. But there are differences as well. And for those that believe in God, we often talk about them being theological differences. So values often shared, but there are some philosophical and theological differences between these different systems of belief. And I think that's really important, that pupils are made to think critically around those. That's what makes a good RE pupil for me, a student, is somebody who is being challenged to go a bit deeper with what they're thinking and why they're thinking, and to have opposite views to come in and challenge that helps them to go deeper. It may make them see the world in a different way, but it may make them clarify why it is that they're believing as they do. And I think that's really helpful. And I want students who are broad-minded. And we've talked before about fundamental British values. And one of those things that Ofsted is really wanting to see in our schools at the moment is that we're preparing pupils for life in modern Britain in the 21st century. And it says that they're able to participate and contribute to. And I think these sort of beliefs and views are helping students to grow up to be able to do that. So that's why I would encourage people to do this. So if you want to look for some practical ideas for how to do that, there are hundreds, literally, of videos on the Interfaith Explorers website, and you could show one of those about what somebody who's religious and what they believe about a key subject, and then switch it to getting the children to speculate about maybe somebody who doesn't believe in God, what would their answer be to that question? And actually, if they've got those 10 commitments, if they've you've taught them about some of the principles, the key principles, they should be able then to speculate and answer, which again gets them working at really high skill levels, and also is getting them deeper into the subject, which is what I'm always wanting to see as an RE advisor. We've talked in previous webinars as well, sorry Paul you weren't here, about the same and similar different activity. And so if you were to put Christian, Muslim and a humanist within that activity and look about what they say about the environment, it would be really good, because there are things that they share and there are things that they're different. And so again, that worksheet, if you remember, it's within the PowerPoint on the one we did on RE and higher order skills. And so you can go back to that and you could make really good use of that and bring humanism in that way. So the final bit before we go over to some questions is just to say that we've put some useful resources onto the PowerPoint for you. A link, first of all, to the British Humanist Association website, and also a website, Humanism for Schools. I've mentioned that book, I'll let you say, and then Paul also entered another book that was sent out a free copy to every school in the, was it secondary school or primary school? I think was it every school? We're not sure.
I'm not sure, but certainly at the very least every secondary school.
Every secondary school.
In England.
Yes. So you may want to as well have a look at buying that as a copy for your school. If you can't find it, we would suggest that's a good buy as well. Paul, what did you want to say? I stopped you from saying something.
Oh,
sorry.
I just wanted to say that the British Humanist Association, and remember, I don't speak on their behalf,
no.
I'm obviously a partner, does provide resources. It provides speakers for schools, but very importantly, it has a very strict code of conduct.
Yes.
Because we do appreciate that this is a very sensitive, very personal issue, and it's very much part of our approach that we don't seek to undermine beliefs. Our aim essentially is to enable children to understand our beliefs and to at least consider that there are different ways of looking at things, but we at all times want to show respect for other people's beliefs, and anyone who speaks in a school from the British Humanist Association should have been trained and should abide by that code of conduct.
Yes. Thank you. And you can find that on the website, actually. It exists there. It's an open document for everyone. So that's helpful. And it's also so that we can give confidence to people, to invite people in and to take that chance and to do something different. Okay, so we're going to go on now to some questions. So, Paul, could you read us out our first question?
Oh dear. Okay. How can you instill confidence in secular humanist pupils to talk about their belief system, especially in a classroom context where they may be a minority?
And that, I think that is a really good question.
Yes.
I think, first of all, the fact that you're even talking about humanism in the classroom is important, because whatever belief system you have, if it is never mentioned throughout your time at school, then that just puts you in that corner of being a minority and not being the same as everyone else. Whereas actually, if it comes into everyday language, and I always make sure when I'm leading an RE lesson that I'll also always talk about people who believe in God as well as people who don't believe in God. And it's just natural to do that. And so I would encourage you as a teacher that you make sure that language, so even when you're learning maybe about what people do believe about God, I would always make sure that I'm saying, well, we know not everybody does. And even if it's only one person in that classroom, to know that, for instance, you know, a quarter of the population in that census ticked that little box. And as Paul said, really that figure is probably a lot higher, because it doesn't mean that people necessarily believe in God, even if they feel culturally included in a particular group. So therefore, things like that help. So some of those facts help. I think our language helps. Is there anything you want to add, Paul, to that one? You don't have to.
Well, one of the reasons that we, myself and my friends, colleagues, set up our group in East London, it was only 3 years ago, there are quite a few local groups all over the country now, was because there are a lot of people who have been brought up in religious communities who, for whatever reason, find that they're losing their faith and do feel alienated and feel a bit at sea. And it's useful to be able to give some sort of support to be able to discuss it with them and say, well, you're, you know, there's nothing wrong with you, and actually you're allowed to have these beliefs and to think them through, because it does mean thinking through a lot of things. And I think there will be, I'm sure, lots of youngsters who maybe feel alienated from what they've been brought up to believe. and do find it difficult to talk about, and it gives them a framework in which to discuss it. Humanists aren't a proselytizing group.
No.
We don't go around trying to persuade people
to join
us.
Yeah.
But the reality is an awful lot of people do, for whatever reason, over a period of time, that actually we don't believe in a supreme being. And then that raises all sorts of other questions about how to live your life. And I think it's important that people have support in being able to think that through, which is the Young Atheist Handbook was actually written by Lon Chahar precisely for that reason. He makes it clear he's not trying to, he doesn't believe in trying to change anyone's mind, but there'll be children who, like himself, found themselves in a very difficult position because they didn't have anyone to talk to about they're losing their belief.
Yeah. So I think of making sure that you're bringing that into your language in the classroom. I think for us as teachers, having some confidence around that is very important, so that we are using that. All of those things help. Whatever the belief system is, when it's a minority view, those things help. Second question, how will Ofsted judge our approach to humanism when assessing schools' methods of promoting fundamental British values? Yeah, I think they would see that positively, in the same way that they would see tolerance and mutual respect. And those would be the two key words that I would want to point out to Ofsted, that as we're taking this approach and as we're taking an inclusive approach and including different belief systems and thought systems, actually what we're building up is mutual respect and tolerance and understanding. And that is what helps pupils to be able to participate in and contribute to life in 21st century Britain. And I think we will find over the next few years, I think my Sacre group, Newham, has always had a humanist rep on it. We've been really fortunate. I inherited my humanist rep when I came about 9 years ago. So I know that they've been there for at least 10 years or more. And what we're finding throughout the country is gradually more and more groups, the Sacre, which help set the RE curriculum and then monitor it with the local authority, are making sure that humanists and other groups are part of that decision making, that setting process. And of course, having a humanist on there is really helpful when you produce new advice. So recently my Sacre produced some new advice on collective worship or assemblies, and Ed, who's part of Paul's group, he was able to look through it and say, Claire, look, I think this wording needs to change, and have you thought about it? Just sounds a bit religious here and it doesn't need to. And actually having someone who's prepared to give up their time and volunteer in that way helps, I feel, my Sacre, and it helps the advice that we're giving out to schools. And it means that we're making sure we're inclusive. And I think that's the really important thing for me. And that's what makes the difference to Ofsted, because they want to see communities involved in the school. So having humanist visitors in would be seen very positively, as it would be to have a Christian or a Muslim or a Sikh visitor. All of those things are seen as positive, because actually you're taking a chance and you're getting children to listen and understand and have conversations with and question and challenge people from different places and different backgrounds with different ideas. And all of that is good for education.
I agree.
Right, well, our time has flown. I said to Paul it will go very quickly. I'll ask him afterwards whether it dragged or went quickly. But thank you very much for giving your time.
Thank you very much for
and thank you for watching today. And next month we have Geraint Evans, who is the lead officer for Ofsted on the Prevent stuff, and we're going to go carrying on with these fundamental British values, and we're having a question and answer session with Geraint. So if you have any questions around Prevent agenda or things that your school is concerned about with that, then please email them into us, and we can get those to Geraint and ask him to talk through some of those points. So thanks very much for watching today. Thank you, Paul, for your time, and we'll see you next month. Bye. I'm nearly there.